Nainamane. Nadlu Tempendi, Ganamayuna Yudamatanya, Wamatona Taranyako. Ganamayunako Yutako, Takaringa Tawila, Panako Tapa Puruna, Bulcha Yadchakuma, Nadlu. Panadlu Wadu Telatina, Mankoriadlu. Nadlu Tampendi, Ramanjeri, Naranjeri, Anangu, Adnamatna, Naranga, Mayunakuma La Yalara, Mani Nabudni, Yanchun Burendi, Ghana Yatanga, Bilyanina Yatanga, which with respect to Ghana speakers, I have wished to say. We acknowledge the Ghana people and their spiritual relationship with the land as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region. We acknowledge their living culture, heritage and beliefs. We also acknowledge the Naranjeri, Ramanjeri, Anangu, Adnamatna and Naranga peoples here today and welcome them to this meeting on Ghana land. May we walk together in harmony and in a spirit of reconciliation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lynn Arnold. I am the chair of the trustees of the Dunstan Foundation, and it's a particular pleasure for me to be here once again to welcome you to this Migration Update Conference, which has become a feature of the demographic calendar of, I'd say, not only Australia, but of South Australia, but of Australia at large. We have every year brought experts together to help us reflect over what is the current migration situation. And of course, we have tended to think of that in terms of the Australian demographic needs and circumstances that have been motivated by our own internal issues, plus the external ones of those wanting to come to this country or needing to come to this country out of fear or persecution. But this year we find ourselves in a particular circumstance where suddenly the situation has become dramatically much more global in our awareness. Not that it always wasn't global, but global in our awareness because of the circumstances of the greatest movement of people since the Second World War, where the number of refugees has gone up 6 million in the last 3 years and now reaches 56 million. Only a very small percentage of whom, in the normal processes of the governments of the world, will receive resettlement. And so we find ourselves internationally forced back into a discussion of what kind of international response can we make to that. In a kind of way, we might be seeing ourselves in those post-war years after the Second World War, when the collapse of systems forced governments together to work out how they would deal with it. At that time, I was about to say if you remember, but I don't know that anyone in this room really would remember it. At that time, the collapse of our monetary systems resulted in the Bretton Woods conferences that actually brought together governments, in those days really of the West, to work out how we could have some stability. And out of that came the models of the IMF and the World Bank. We had the start of some work on international movement of people, and it was out of that time that an international conference resulted in the International Organization of Migration being established. But it, of course, never had the mandatory powers that the IMF and the World Bank had. So the situation perhaps now is that more than ever, rather than individual countries making individual responses that will always be limited to their individual circumstances without relevance to the circumstances individually of other nations around them, needs to be replaced by some international compact where we can deal with the vast movement and deal with it with the spirit of the benign rather than the spirit of the malign. The idea of a blocking out is both inhumane and ultimately unworkable. But the situations of a conference like this is to find out what the current situation is, how that circumstance has changed since our last update, and we will have much to hear this morning about that, and how we as a society can deal with that. A society wearing our local hats, our national hats, but our global citizen hats. So I'm really looking forward to today's update. I always do enjoy them, but I'm particularly looking forward to today's update. In the morning session, we have three special presentations. First of all, in a moment, I'll be introducing Zoe Bettison, I'm a former parliamentary colleague of hers. She's still there, and long may she be there. Then afterwards, Dr. Helen Feast will be giving the Graham Hugo Memorial Lecture. Now, we remember with great emotion, really, the significant contribution of Graham to these updates, but also to the debate generally, but also as a great human being. But I'll introduce Helen more in a moment. And then finally, before morning tea, Professor Paul James will be speaking as well. So my task now is, in fact, to arrange for the official opening to happen, so that what you've heard up to now is not official. It will become official very shortly when Zoe Bettison, who is representing the Premier, but also a minister responsible for many areas very relevant to the area of the migration update, ageing, multicultural affairs, social housing and youth, all of which are impacted by migration. Zoe was elected to the State Parliament as the third member for Ramsey. I was the first. Mike Rand was the second, so I mean, just look at that kind of ancestry that's happening in the members for Ramsey. In 2012, with a long-standing interest in education, training and business investment. So she comes from the area that's very dear to my heart, the Salisbury area, but was in fact born in Gawler and lived in the mid-north of South Australia. Zoe is a very active minister and member of Parliament and very acutely interested in these major issues affecting our society. Would you please join me in welcoming Zoe Bettison to the platform?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Lynn for a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I'd like to acknowledge the land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with the country. It is a pleasure to open what is now a yearly event focused on the important role of migration in our thriving state. And I'm absolutely delighted because I think this is the third time that I've actually been able to attend this conference and the second time to open. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Dunstan Foundation over the last 15 or so years, which reflects well upon the legacy and values of the late Premier Don Dunstan. Their foundation's focus on social justice and equality are important areas to engage debate and promote discussion in our community. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the late Professor Graham Hugo, who has left a tremendous legacy in demographic and migration research. Professor Hugo had a great relationship with Immigration SA and policy officers across the South Australian Government. This relationship extended further to the Federal Immigration Department over many years and internationally via the United Nations, the International Labour Office, the World Bank and the Organisation for the Economic Cooperation and Development. Professor Hugo was a true and impartial scholar who helped us to become more informed, and I'm sure more will be said today about his contribution and legacy. Today's conference will engage global and national themes in a South Australian context. As a state with a small population, we must adapt to global circumstance and engage best practice if we are to be competitive. South Australia's demographic outlook faces a number of challenges, including moderate population growth, low and declining fertility rates, and an ageing population. Lower workforce participation rates and an increased ratio of dependents can place constraints on our prosperity and wealth. And strong net overseas migration in the past decade has helped soften these pressures. However, South Australia's population growth at just under 1% growth per annum still falls short of other mainland states and territories. The arrival of new migrants and the conversion of migrants from temporary pathways to permanent visas support our permanent population growth. Migration is likely to remain a key to supporting a demographic profile that will sustain long-term economic growth and prosperity. As Minister for Multicultural Affairs, I'm often asked, what does migration offer us? We know that migrants complement our diversity, increase cultural and social vibrancy, and contribute to our state's skills and assets. Temporary skilled migration under the 457 visa program provides support to employers and industries facing immediate skills shortages. The 457 visa has a particularly strong use in our regions, where it can be difficult to attract skilled labour to large projects and operations. International students are also temporary migrants. Like 457 visa holders, many of them seek to stay on permanently, contributing to our economy over the long term as well as the short to medium term. International student education is South Australia's largest services export, with education-related travel topping $1 billion in 2014 for the first time. This is estimated to support over 6,500 local jobs, typically with high skill and high wages. Last month, the South Australian Government launched its Destination Adelaide plan, which will seek to bring more international students to Adelaide and enhance their experiences while here. The family migration program allows people to be reunited with their loved ones, whilst humanitarian migrants have the opportunity to live in a country where their rights are safeguarded and their safety greatly increased. While business skill migrants bring investment and support direct jobs in the businesses they establish and purchase. At the largest end of the investment scale, several apartment buildings recently finished or being built in the Adelaide CBD have involved business migrants partnering with local and international companies. This creates construction jobs and brings more people to the city, both residents and visitors. The state government also welcomed permanent skilled migrants who bring their strong education levels and skills. The Commonwealth's continuous survey of Australia's migrants indicates that 95% of recent skilled migrants have post-school qualifications, compared to marginally above 61% for the South Australian working age population. The workforce participation rate of recent skilled migrants is also outstanding, estimated to be 95%, compared to a national participation rate of 65%. Ladies and gentlemen, various Australian researchers have concluded that migration, and skilled migration in particular, has contributed to improving the overall standard of living in Australia in economic terms. It is for this reason that even in times of tighter economic conditions, maintaining skilled migration remains a focus in most developed economies. The migration debate deserves a serious and considered assessment of its benefits and its challenges. And I'm confident that today's discourse will add maturity and depth to the conversation with the community. I wish you all a thought-provoking and informative day, and thank the Dunstan Foundation for bringing this event together. Thank you.